Welcome everyone today. My name is Bethany Corder. I work at the Mammy Family Public Library, and I'm so excited to introduce Chef Cindy to you. For those of y'all who have not taken her classes before, we did want to go over a little bit, share a little bit of her bio. Um, Cindy grew up in the Pacific Northwest, that beautiful place. She spent 27 years traveling the world, enjoying the culture and food. And she did this because she was in the military, the Air Force, actually. Um, so we're sure glad that when she retired in 2014, she used the GI Bill and went back to culinary school. She studied for 2 years, also underneath some pretty famous chefs as well. And she learned about everything from cake decorating to cooking over a live fire and smoking. And I've heard the rumor that she might be teaching a class over some of that this summer, perhaps. So that's pretty exciting. Cindy teaches about 15 different classes per year. And currently she's teaching some of them on Zoom. And I don't know if she's doing it right now or normally she also can teach classes in her home or yours if you want a private class. I will post her website because I really do want y'all to go check it out. It's pretty cool. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Chef Cindy to
Good
y'all.
morning. Thank you, Bethany. How many of you like decorating cookies? You wouldn't be here, right? If you didn't, I would hope, because it's a kind of a labor of love. So it's very detail oriented. You have to have a lot of patience. And believe me, this is something that I have been doing for years now. And it takes a lot of patience to grow and become good at it. So just bear that in mind. Be patient with yourself because you have to start by taking baby steps. Okay. So with that said, what are we going to do today? Romeo and Juliet, any Romeos out there? So we're going to take a look at some tools and equipment. I did send you, Bethany probably sent you the tools and equipment. We're just going to go over what some of that is if you've never worked with fondant or royal icing before. We're going to talk about fondant briefly. How many of you are wanting to do the fondant cookies? Because they're faster than royal icing. First of all, they don't have to dry like royal icing does. So we'll be talking about that briefly, and then we're going to be going into royal icing. Some of the most important things that are takeaways from this class are the consistencies of the royal icing. So, if you're just watching this, that's cool. That's just great because you can go back to this later because Bethany's going to have it posted on the YouTube link. And so you can review both the fondant and today's class. And so in today's class, probably the most important thing to take away is the consistency of that royal icing, because that can make or break your cookies and your day. We're going to color it and we're going to set up the piping bags or bottles. And then we're going to learn some decorating techniques that are new. And for you all, if you've never been to any of the classes, it's all new, I guess. So this is the first item on this decorating tools and equipment list. This is a nonstick rolling pin. You can get these at Walmart, Hobby Lobby, Michael's, and they're silicone. They don't stick to the fondant. I don't have a fondant smoother here. They're all in Florida, but you can use the base of your hand and the tips of your fingers. But the fondant smoother is to keep your fingerprints off that fondant. If you've ever seen beautiful wedding cakes, they look like pristine, beautiful, too cute to eat works of art. They're expensive for a reason because it takes a lot to make them flawless. A lot of skill goes into that. So you also have these little tools that come with some of the kits that you can get at Michael's. These are fondant decorating tools. This is a ball tool, and you can see there's different widths or different sizes of the balls. and they just do different things. So this is a veiner tool, and I talked about that in the video from Christmas. And gel food colors is what you want to use, not the liquid kind, because that will change the consistency of your fondant. And the gel colors are just much richer. You need a lot less. If you're going to color your fondant, I would suggest getting rubber gloves, because they'll get all over your hands. Or if you don't have rubber gloves, use Crisco. And piping gel. I like to use piping gel, but you can just use corn syrup or jam. That works. And then these cornstarch pouches are really very handy. They have cornstarch in there, and you just dust your surface before you put down the fondant so that it doesn't stick. It's kind of like flour, but you don't use flour. You know, the concept of pie dough and flour. And then today, we're going to be playing with luster dust, and you can get these in various colors. This is pink sherbet, and you're going to see how cool that is. There's all different colors. You can use it wet or dry. That's going to be one of our techniques today. And then plunger cutters. If you want to invest in these were a link on the equipment sheet that I sent Bethany. These are little hearts, and you can see the heart shape. And all you do is you cut the fondant, and then you use this plunger thing and push on it, and it just pops it right out. And they're all different sizes, and it saves a whole lot of time. So these are some of the little shapes, you know, that come out of the plunger cutters, little heart shapes. And then I also have flower ones, which, if you look at this is a heart, one of the cookies that we're going to do. And this is the flower plunger cutters with a little nonpareil in the center. Okay, so isn't that the cutest? And you can see the luster dust and the stencil. So those are techniques we're gonna do today. And silicone molds are for things like this cookie. This is made from a rose silicone mold. And this is, you can use those candy melts, or you can use fondant, or you could use your royal icing if you have royal icing left. All right, so embossing and printing mats. These are examples of what that looks like. And that was that cookie that I just showed you, used this imprinting mat right here for the fondant. And then I luster dust the top. And then tweezers for putting those nonpareils in. If you know, those suckers roll around, so tweezers are sometimes nice to have. And then a palette knife. This is handy for, it's like spackling something flat, you know, for that stencil that I just showed you, the love stencil. And then all kinds of paint brushes and sanding sugar and nonpareils or sprinkles are also kind of part of the decorating assembly. So working with fondant, you want to prepare the fondant before you actually can use it, because a lot of times it's going to come in a package and it's going to be, you want to make sure that it's soft. And these are some of my preferred. Satin Ice is a really good brand. This is vanilla fondant. And this is like cake decorating tub size. But if you're just starting out, I would buy those small little packets like this that come, you know, from Michael's or Hobby Lobby, and just get a small packet. And I would get vanilla or red. Like a red is kind of takes a lot of gel food color to make that red. So I would get, for Valentine's, you know, unless you're a really fan of red. But red is hard to achieve. But if you got a good gel, you know, a couple drops, you can knead it in. But versus, you know, it's so much more expedient to just buy this than to have to get your hands all red and make it. It's just so much faster to just buy it, but you certainly can make it. And you want to knead it with your hands to warm it up. And if you don't test it out in the store before you buy it, it could be hard. And in the case that it's hard, you can pop it in the microwave even for like 2 or 3 seconds, and that will soften it up if it does go hard. Otherwise, you're going to have to knead it. And this is wrapped in cellophane because it will dry out just like your royal icing will if you do not wrap it up. As far as coloring it, like I said, you need gloves. And then marbling is just basically taking 2 colors, say this red here and this pink, and making little logs and then twisting them and making an S or a Z shape. And then twisting it again and then rolling it with your rolling pin out, and it's going to make it cool, like a tie-dye kind of look, you know? So that's marbling. And then silicone molds, here's the rows that I showed you. And these are super fun to use. There's all kinds. There's hearts, there's bows. This is a bow one. And all you do is you squish the fondant in there, but you have to, first of all, dust it with this cornstarch pouch. And then you basically, like say this one is a heart one. So this is kind of dry here. You have to knead it and work it with your fingers, and you have to make sure your surface is free of any little specks, because like I said, those wedding cakes, they're flawless, right? So what you do is you take a little teeny piece and you go over your surface and pick up any debris with the fondant. It acts like a little vacuum. So that's what you got to do before you roll your fondant out, is clean that surface. Make sure because a lot of this stuff is invisible. You don't even see it, but the fondant will pick it up. So you just take that little piece, go over your surface, and make sure you get all this whatever up, and then just keep it for later. And then embossing, I showed you the embossing mat. So basically you just roll this out and then on the cornstarch, and then put the embossing sheet over it and then press it into the fondant, and then use your cookie cutter, which, you know, if it's a heart, you're going to use the heart-shaped cookie cutter, same size as your cookie, unless you want a smaller part. And then you kind of move it around on the fondant, make sure it's all disconnected from the surrounding, what you rolled out, and then you pull it up and then pull up what you just don't need, and then use your heart. And a lot of times you want to use something like this to lift the fondant because you don't want your fingerprints on it. Okay. And then moving on to royal icing, we're going to go back and we're going to do this, so don't worry. Consistencies. We're going to be using 2 different consistencies, and they are known as outlining or piping consistency. And this is a takeaway. And flooding consistency. Okay, so outlining is, which do you think is thicker, outlining or flooding?
Flooding.
You're right, Celeste. Flooding, because outlining, you're creating, like say on this cookie right here, you can see the outline. It is the pink sparkly stuff. Okay. First, I did the outline, and then if you're a beginner, you want to have a bowl with these sprinkles in it. If you make a mistake, you can dip it or, you know, cover it with these sprinkles, and then you can touch the line and move it back to where you want it. See? So the outline is like a dam that holds the flood icing in. Okay. So it's a little lake of flood icing inside the outline icing, or the dam. So you're right. The flood is thinner than the outline or piping consistency. And then we're going to color. and set up piping bags. And one thing that, again, just like with fondant, you have to keep this stuff covered. I have saran wrap over this, but you can also use a damp towel. The key is make sure everything is covered, okay? This is a piping bag already set up, and it is in a glass with wet paper towel at the bottom so it doesn't crust over. Because that will, if you don't cover your flood consistency, it's going to crust up. And, you know, if you have it in a piping bag with a tip, it could clog the tip and, you know, with the crusty stuff. And that's kind of something that is going to make your day not as fun as it could be. So remember that. And then we're going to learn some techniques called wet on wet. If you look at the heart in the right upper part of the slide, you're going to see a wet on wet technique. For the wet on wet technique, the key to doing that successfully is to make sure that the colors, see the red, see the white, see the pink, that they are all at the same consistency. Equal consistencies for wet on wet technique, whether it's dots or lines or whatever else you're going to do. For it to melt into that cookie and have a flat surface, it has to be equal consistencies. So your pink cannot be thicker than your red. Okay, so they all have to be equal thickness or consistency. And what you do for that one is basically pipe a dot and drag a scribe tool or a toothpick through it to make little hearts. And you can do that when you make say a coulis and are doing a nice fine dining dinner at home or whatever. You'll see it if you go out to fine dining a lot. As they do the same thing. They do dots of the sauce on the plate, and then they, like for a dessert, can drag a knife through it and make hearts. Okay. And then dry techniques, borders. I showed you an example of that, but you see the heart on the bottom of the slide. The pink is the flood that has dried overnight. You have to dry royal icing for quite a long time. And if you have an oven and you want to speed the process and you have a dehydrator, you can put it in the dehydrator and speed the drying process up. So again, the dry techniques would be piping the border of the heart first, and then coming back after you've flooded it and it's dried, and then piping that white spiral curlicue and then the two dots. Okay, and then you can also do lines that are, again, you're going to have more of a 3D effect if you wait till your flood dries and then go back on top of it with a thicker consistency piping or outline thickness of icing. And then you can write on it as well. Okay, any questions on that? So our new decorating techniques are going to be stenciling, which you can see on the right. That is a stencil. And then I already showed you the love cookie. This one here is a stencil. Okay. And you can, I don't know if you can see a 3D effect, but it's raised a little bit from the white flood icing that dried overnight. Okay, so that's a stencil. And here's other examples of stencils. This is the love one. And then this is another one. Okay, and it's nice because they have these little handles that you can hold on to. And then another stencil that is really fun is this, or dots. And the dot cookie is made by using this product, which is just color mist that you can get at HEB, I'm sure has it. I love HEB. And they come in all colors. And this is an example of the dot stencil. So what I did for this is basically put tape around the areas that I didn't want getting sprayed. And then it's good to set up some cardboard like in an L or a U and put the cookie on a piece of paper towel and then have at it with a spray because otherwise it's going to create this little red cloud of spray in your kitchen and on your counter. So you kind of have to protect it. So I think this is a cool effect, you know, with the little dots, and it makes cookie decorating really fun because it's really fast. So, and then you have to let that dry. Okay, so the third technique is luster dust. And again, this is an example of luster dust that is dry on the surface of the fondant. You can see there's kind of a pearly sheen. Yeah, and you see how that's shiny? And then on the rose, you can see that's wet luster dust, okay, that I just highlighted the petals of the rose with.
And Cindy, for the luster dust, do they, I'm assuming, make it out of sugar? A form of sugar?
It's made out of edible powder.
Uh-huh.
It's non-toxic. This is another example of wet. Okay, that's what it looks like. And what you do for that is use alcohol. And I like to use real alcohol, like vodka is what I use, because it's cheaper than like almond food flavoring or lemon. Those are alcohol based and you can use those. And what I do is I take an eyedropper and the alcohol, I just put a little tiny bit, like 3 drops in one of these little paint palette things. And then I dip my brush in the luster dust, and you can see I've already been using the gold. And then you just kind of mix it together with the alcohol and then paint it on whatever you want. What I did with the that love cookie is just flick it, you know, like wherever random splatters would go. And it has a really cool effect, I think. And the other thing we're going to be talking about is those edible wafer papers. And this is one of my favorite companies, Fancy Flowers, and Bethany has the link down below. They send me catalogs all the time. And they have these really cute wafer papers that you can buy. And this is you remember the heart candies? This is a wafer paper for cookies. So they have all kinds. So check them out because that's and just type in on their search, wafer paper. So, okay. Any questions on anything so far?
Yes, this is Melissa. What kind of tape do you use on your stencils? Does it matter?
The easiest to get off is that painter's tape. I mean, that's super easy to use, and that's what I use to label anything that I make in the kitchen. That's one thing you learn in culinary school, which I went through for 2 years, and you learn to label everything with you know, what day you made it, what it is, so that when you stick it in the freezer, it's not a mystery anymore. And you don't have to like dig for stuff that it just makes it way easier. So, all right. So now what I'm going to do is make my screen larger, and everybody can see me, right? I'm going to expand my view there. All right. So what I'm going to show you now is how to do the fondant. So again, what I was saying is you dust your surface with cornstarch, and then take your piece of fondant, and I think I'm gonna use the larger, not the red. I'm going to go with pink. And again, it's always covered. So I've got saran wrap, and I also have a baggie covering it. So it's not going to dry out on me. So I've got this, I made this with a hot pink and a white. And this is the color. I wanted a lighter pink. So that's a way that you can make different colors with your fondant. If you buy white, you can make, if you got the gel food coloring, you can make whatever color you want using that gel and the white fondant. But so I had red and I had hot pink and white. So I can make a variety of colors just with those three, you know, and different hues of, or variations from white to red. Okay, so I'm kneading this to warm it up. And I'm also feeling if there's any little crusty bits in there. And if there are, then I remove them. But I don't feel any in this one. So that's good. So I'm just rolling it out just like you would a pie crust, right? And you want to roll it like 1/8 of an inch thin. What the objective is to, and I have these little guides on my rolling pin. This is about 1/8 of an inch, I'd say. The idea is to get it pretty thin because no one likes a big mouthful of fondant usually, unless it's homemade marshmallow flavor, which is pretty good. So you can make your own, of course. So what I'm going to do is take this embossing mat right here, which I have stored away in this little cellophane thing. And I'm going to lay it on my fondant, and then I'm going to use my hands and holding it still so it doesn't roll around and mess up the pattern. I'm going to press it into the fondant. Okay. So hopefully this will work, and I had enough cornstarch so where it's going to lift off easily. We'll see. Oh, goody, it did. So I'm going to adjust it just in case, make sure that it doesn't stick when I lift it up on the other side. So I'm going to flip it over again, take it off, and then I'm going to use my heart-shaped cutter to cut out the shape that I want, placing it where I want, you know, for the cutest look, getting all the different pattern in there that I can. Okay, so that looks good. So I'm going to push down, wiggle it around a little bit, and it's separated. So I'm going to just slip this away, and right away I'm going to cover it up and put it away for now till I'm ready to use it again. And I might show you just how to use it with a mold in a second. So I'll put this away in here. And then what I'm going to do is use that piping gel that I told you about. This is, and like I said, if you want to use jam or corn syrup, have at it. You can do that. I like using the piping gel by PME, and you can look online and it just stays good. So this is the piping gel, and I have a fat, wide brush to apply it quickly to my cookie. Okay, so here's my cookie. So the first thing is apply the gel so it has something to stick to. And you don't want to go all the way to the edge because then it's going to be sticky there, and you don't want it sticky on the edge. You want to leave that alone. Okay, so I'm just putting it about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the cookie. All right,
Melissa, what other than the piping gel, you said corn syrup, or what else could we use?
jam or corn syrup?
Thank you.
Good question. All right, so I'm just placing it on my cookie, and I can still move it, you know, with my fingertips. So I'm getting it where I want to. And then I'm just very lightly going to press it into the cookie. And then you can use your finger. If there's any rough spots, you kind of want to round those edges and get rid of any rough spots. All right. And what I'm going to do is pipe around the border using royal icing. Okay. So there's the cookie. It's all done. Now the mold, this is a heart-shaped mold. I think this one's kind of cute. This one at the top, but that one's really cute too. I think I might use this one right here. So what I've done is I've already dusted this mold. And what you want to do is go like, after you dust it, you want to slap it down because there's going to be excess cornstarch in there, which I don't really want. So I'm going to push the fondant into the mold and get rid of any excess. I could probably make 2 hearts out of this amount of fondant. It doesn't take a whole lot. So I'm just going to put some cornstarch on my fingers so it doesn't stick to my fingers. Oop, and pop out like that. So you want to just make sure that all the fondant is flush within that mold. So I'm just using my fingers to wiggle around so I can definitely see that the heart is all inside the mold and it's level with the surface of the mold. Okay, so then you just wiggle it to pop it out and it should fall right out. And then very carefully, you just lift it up and there it is. See how cute that is? See the detail? Okay. So I'm just gonna let that sit and harden for a bit. And if there's any like little spots that went outside the mold, then you just use your fingers and gently put those back into place. And now for the other one, I'm gonna do, I think I'll do the bigger one. I have enough for that. So again, I'm just using my fingers to push in all that fondant into the mold and make it flush with the surface of that mold. So I have to work it from the outside in to that heart, pushing in to make sure, and it's perfect. Look at how perfect that is. Am I good or what? All right, so there's this heart and I just turn it over, wiggle it, and there it is. And this one has these cute little details on it. Okay, so that is perfect to luster dust later. All right, so we have 2 hearts that are basically, that's how you use these molds. All right, so moving on, we're going to set this aside for a moment and talk about royal icing. All right, so I want to get rid of this for the time being. Come back to that later. All right, so royal icing, I have some right here that according to the package directions on I used meringue powder for mine. And according the instructions for the recipe are right on the back of it. You have to whip it with a hand mixer or a stand mixer for like at least 7 minutes. And it gets into this really thick consistency, which is what you're going to use to make all your other consistencies. Okay. So I use a spoon and I am going to, where is my little wet paper towel? So I'm going to mix this and show you just how thick this is. See this? Really thick. Okay, so that's after I've whipped it for, and you can keep this. this stays at room temperature with meringue powder. You can keep it for like 2 weeks. It might separate, but you just re-whip it and it'll be fine. Okay, so I'm going to take some of this and I'm going to make thick consistency, white. And then all you do to add color is just add a few drops of food coloring. But know that that's going to thin it a bit, okay? As well as I add some other stuff too, but so I'm going to just add a good amount of that right there and set this aside, right? And then cover it up again because again, it'll crust if you don't. So always keep your royal icing covered. All right, so right here, I have some already made like flood consistency. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to keep making flood, but first I'm going to show you what stiff consistency looks like. So you only add a little bit of water. And I also add food flavoring, like I use almond or vanilla or whatever flavor. You can use alcohol. And that's going to thin it as well. So I'm going to add just a teeny weeny bit of almond food flavoring to this, like a couple drops. And that's plenty. And then I also add corn syrup because it adds elasticity. And I only add like a drop, like a fourth of a teaspoon of corn syrup to this amount because it's not that much. I only have like a fourth a cup of icing here, but once I add the liquid like corn syrup, food flavoring, and water, it's going to make more because it's going to be, you know, more liquidy. So I add a little corn syrup for elasticity. And then from there, to take it to flood, you're going to need to add more water. But right now, I would say that this is piping consistency. But you could thin it down because it's pretty stiff peaks. So if you look at this peak here. That's a stiff peak, isn't it? It's not folding over really. It's not a soft peak. So if you want a soft peak, you're going to need to add a little bit of water. So I always, like I said, I have everything, you know, ready. And again, you're going to want to make sure that you take time when you're just learning, because it's, you know, even people that have been doing cookies for years, that's the hardest thing. It can depend on the weather as to, I only added like 2 drops of water. Okay. So I'm going to stir that in. But things like humidity can affect it. And so each batch is going to be different. So like I said, you got to have patience when you do this. Okay, so now it's a little bit softer consistency. And if I see that, see how it's curling over? The icing just curled over. Whee. So it's a bit softer, but I can still thin it out a little bit more and make medium consistency. I think I want to make it a little easier to pipe. So I'll put in like 3 more drops of water. And it's best that you just go slow because you can't take it back. It's hard to put the genie back in the bottle. All right, so now this is pretty good. And you want like a toothpaste consistency. What you're aiming for here is toothpaste, okay? That's the best way I can describe it, is toothpaste consistency. All right, so that looks good for stiff piping consistency. All right, so that's what we're looking for that. but I already have that made. So I want to make flood. And for that, I'm going to add more water. Any questions on the royal icing consistency so far?
So let's say you mess up or you don't like the consistency. And could you repeat one more time how to make it stiffer?
You add more powdered sugar.
Okay.
And that's, that's going to take a while because you got to sift it, and then depending on how long you've had it, you might need to re-whip it with the beaters. So, okay, so you see this, it's becoming a thinner consistency, and I would say this is a medium. Okay, so what we're looking for flood is kind of the consistency of corn syrup. It disappears in, say, when you count 15 seconds. So this is not, this is very thick still, isn't it? It's not corn syrup consistency. It's not even falling off my spoon. So I'm going to add more water, about 1/4 teaspoon. And again, after you do this a while, you're going to get the hang of it. And it might take a few times. So just be gentle and patient with yourself as you learn this process, because it is a learning process. And like I said, I've been doing it for, more than 5 years. Various cookie orders, and, that gives you a lot of practice. So it's, now you can see that it's starting to fall off my spoon. Right? Now, the thing is, you want to make sure that it disappears in about 15 seconds. So count 15, someone. I would say that that's about 15 seconds, and you can see that there's no visible 3D effect going on there. It's all pretty smooth, right? So that's what you're looking for flood, is for it to heal in 15 seconds. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There's still a little bit of, there's still a little 3D effect in there, but if you shake it, it will disappear. So that is what you're looking for. That is good to go. Now, for my piping bag, let me show you how to put together a piping bag. Have any of you ever done that before? Raise your hand. Okay, so those of you who have done it before, do you use couplers and piping tips, or do you just cut the end of the piping bag? I think it was Wendy. You nodded. You've done this before, right, Wendy?
I think she's on mute.
Do you know how to unmute yourself? Maybe Bethany can help.
There it is. Yeah, I used tips before.
Okay. And a coupler?
I don't know what that is.
Okay, all right, well, cool. So this is a new learning opportunity for you to learn what that is. So I need to get this icing off my hands without going into the sink in the kitchen. So I'm just going to wet this paper towel here. This is also something that you definitely want to have handy, as a wet paper towel. So as far as couplers and tips and equipment, what I do, if you have the piping bag, right, this is a coupler. There are two pieces. This is the piece that goes into the piping bag, and I've snipped the piping bag about, if you can see that, right above the end of the coupler.
Yes.
You don't want to do it higher than that because you're going to have a
Don't
icing
out.
mess in your hands. Okay, so this is the other half of the coupler, which is what screws onto these little ridges right here and holds the tip, which goes right here in place. So I always put a cuff on my piping bag and put it over glass. Okay, that's the easiest way to do it. So I'm going to set that aside and show you some tips. And I think I recommended buying a number 1, a couple number 2s and a number 3, but these are writing tips. They're just PMA. PMA is my favorite brand versus Wilton because Wilton has a seam in there which can cause your icing to curl, but PMA does not. It's made out of one solid piece. Here's one that has a seam. This is a Wilton. You can see the little bracket things, right? And that can affect the result. All right, so this is the brand I recommend is PME, but you know, Wilton's okay. You can buy that. This is an Attico piping bag, which is reusable. These kind you can use over and over and over. Or this is a Wilton, and this is an Attico. There's all different brands out there. So what you're going to do is, these are the different diameters. They go from like 0. This is a 1 diameter. This is a 4. You see the difference, right? See the tips? Actually, this might be no, this is a 4. So you can see how they vary in width. So this one here, that's the tiny one, a number 1 tip, that would be perfect for detail work. Things like this, little dots, piping little dots like this one. You can see that I have pink dots in there, right? I have pink and white, and they're very small dots. That was used with a number 1 tip. And you can also write with that if you want to do, you know, write happy birthday or whatever on a cake. So I'm going to use a rather fat one, which is a number 4, because I'm going to be doing some flooding with this. And if you have a number 5, I mean, they go up. This is it doesn't have a number, but anyways, you can see how big that tip is. All right, so that's like for thicker icing. So I'm going to use this one, and what you do is you put it over the coupler and the piping bag. If it's over that, then you screw the other part of the coupler to hold the tip in place. And this way you can change tips and, you know, have different effects, because there's all different kinds of tips. I mean, there's a myriad of tips used for different things, like making leaves, ruffles, all kinds of things. So flowers, stars, that kind of thing. So the world is your oyster, go for it. So you put your piping bag over the glass. And another good tip is to kind of, if it's a loose icing, which this one is, you want to push the bag into the coupler to keep the icing from running out. And that is just going to fill this part right here, okay? And keep it from draining out the bottom. The other thing that I do is I put some wet paper towels in the bottom of my glass to keep it from crusting over, okay? So this is all set up now. All I have to do is spoon in my royal icing, which I will do now. And that is not it. Ugh. That is the thick stuff to replenish it. So there it is. All right, so all I'm gonna do is scoop it in. And for this, actually, I think I'm gonna use my little spatula. These come in handy. Make the job really twice as fast. All right. So it is in there. And now the final part of this is to secure the top. And then you're ready to go. So I've got my icing in the bag. And now you just shake it, bring it down, and you want to do it like toothpaste, you know, like you're moving it to the bottom of the back of to the tip. And then you want to twist it to secure it in place to keep it coming out the top. So you just twist it. And then I like these little rubber band things that basically secure it. So you just wrap it around, and then they have this little end thing that hooks it into place and keeps it from coming apart. And then your bag is done, okay? And you can choke down on this a little bit. You can see it's pretty loose, so it is coming out the top. So you might want to just keep it horizontal until, or just kink it so it doesn't flow out the bottom. Okay, so now we're ready to go. And I'm going to show you an outline of the fondant that we just did. All right. Actually, first I'm going to do another cookie that outlines it for a wet on wet technique. So I'm going to take my heart cookie here, and I'm going to use thick consistency. I'm going to show you a different way to do this now. This is piping or outline consistency, pink. Okay, so actually, I think I'm going to do purple. This has a bigger tip. All right, so I'm just going to test it first. And this is something that is really helpful when you first start piping. If you've never done it before, you always want to test it. Okay, so this is like a little practice sheet. If you buy one of those little kits from Hobby Lobby or Michael's, they have these, or Walmart, they have these Wilton decorating kits, and they come with these little plastic sheets that, and you can just use parchment paper, but you can remove these and practice all these different techniques like shell technique, basket weave, etc. So, you know, you want to first test out your icing on something like this. Make sure that it's flowing before you start doing it on your cookie. Okay, so you just kind of come in here, and this is how you pipe a line. You keep the tip off of, you don't touch the cookie. You just let the line fall and guide it by moving the piping bag. Okay, and let the icing fall where you want it, and touch down when you want to stop. Okay, so I am just following this little vine here, and I can tell that my, oh, there it curled a little bit. And you also want to wipe your tip to keep it from getting crusted over, because it can do that too. And then touch down when you want to stop. So you start by touching it and then lift up and then touch down when you want to stop. Okay. Now for dots, you can see that at that time, the angle of the piping bag was at an angle, right? But for dots, it's going to be perpendicular. So you're going to squeeze the bag and pull up and stop squeezing and pull up. So You don't touch the cookie, but you squeeze the bag so that the icing touches the cookie and then pull up, okay? So squeeze, stop squeezing and pull up. There's the two different techniques of dots and lines. All right, so now I can do it on my cookie because my icing is flowing pretty well. And so I'm going to do my outline. Okay, so I start at this side and I'm going to go about 1/4 of an inch away from, and if you have a mistake like that, all you have to do is get your scribe tool and lift it off and get rid of it, okay? So don't worry about mistakes because they will happen, you know, if you have an air bubble in your bag or whatever, that's all you do is use a scribe tool or a little palette knife and get it off. Okay, so you have to have some pressure on the bag to get a nice flow of icing so where it doesn't break. Okay, so I'm just going really slow. My tip is about 1/4 an inch above the cookie and I am just following it. And then I'm going to touch down. If you want to stop, you just touch down. Okay, so that's part of my outline there. Can you all see that? And now I'm going to turn it so I can do the other part. Now, doing the same thing, squeezing the bag and letting the line come out and then moving it where I want to. And you go slow because, you know, otherwise the line, it would pull the icing too thin and it would break. Okay, so there's my outline. Now, if you need to go back and fix a couple things, that's what the scribe tool is for. I want to just join those two and I want to fix the end here. All right, so that's my outline. Now, I'm going to just put this back in the glass so it touches. Now I'm going to set this one aside for now. And this one, I want to show you how to use the sprinkles. Actually, I think I'm going to do the luster dust first. So I'm just going to dry brush that on. And I think I'm going to use the pink sherbet. And you're going to see how cool this is. I'm going to get this over here in case it makes a little bit of mess on the table. And for this, I'm going to use a kind of a bushy brush, but it's also flat and kind of rounded. You just want to be able to get into those little nooks and crannies to highlight them. Okay, so all you do is you dip your brush into the luster dust, take a bit off, and then it's like makeup for cookies. Makes them look so pretty. See the effect that it's having already? It's making it really shimmer. So I'm going to do half of it so you can see the effect versus the other side is not luster dusted and it's very dull looking. It doesn't bring out all the detail in that embossing impression mat versus this side that I'm luster dusting. You can see the difference, right? Can you see that? Isn't that pretty? So that is dry luster dust. Did anybody buy the luster dust? Well, you should check that out because there you have it at Michael's, Hobby Lobby, Walmart. Well, I don't know about Walmart, but Hobby Lobby and Michael's definitely do. So that's all there is to the luster dust effect. And you know, it really enhances the look and makes it so elegant looking, I think. All right, so that's done. And now I'm going to do the outline in pink. So this is a smaller tip, but I'm just going to do dots. And you get the idea. And this is a fine tip. I think it's a 1 or a 2 at the most. Okay,
This is Melissa.
so
How
that's
long
all
do you,
there is to it. See that?
and how long are you waiting until you are able to do the outline?
Well, this is, you can do that immediately because fondant, it's really, and if you make a mistake, you just use your scribe tool and remove that little dot. These are like pearls. I like to think of them, they look like pearls. So that's the first way to start it, is just to do little pearls or dots around the border to finish it off, right? And then, so you just keep doing that. And then if you want to say, make it more beautiful, you could add another and finish it with this heart in the center, right? Now for this heart, you could either do the dry luster dust, which would be really pretty, in a different color. So I'm going to just do, I'm going to show you the difference with the, do you want to do gold or silver? This is coin silver. What do you think? Coin silver? I don't know. Gold is really pretty. I think I might do gold and show you liquid gold. Liquid gold. Isn't that a record company or something? Anyway, so for the wet luster dust effect, again, remember you take some alcohol. Can you all see this? And I'm going to put a couple drops in my little paint palette here, and then put my Tito's away for later, and take my antique gold. I'm going to do gold again, but you can see the pink versus the gold effect. So I'm going to take this out and drop a little bit in there, quite a bit, and then just mush this around. Can you see that? It's like mixing paint. So it's pretty thick. All right. And then I'm going to just lightly brush it over the top. Or should I do a rose? I do have roses. What do you think? Rose or heart? Choices, choices.
Do the rose.
Say again?
The rose.
Okay, we'll do the rose. So I just take my rose, which is a candy melt, and I'm just going to lightly go around the petals with it and just bring out the design. You can see it totally adds interest to a flat surface, because otherwise you really couldn't see the detail. But now look at it. Everybody see that? It's just a lot more shimmery, prettier. So you just kind of highlight. And that is all there is to it. And so I take some of my royal icing and I put it on where I want it on the cookie. I'm just gonna use pink again, put it in the middle. And I'm using the stiff consistency because it will dry faster than the flood consistency. All right, and then I'm just putting it on top and then letting it dry. Like I said, you have to let this dry for about 8 hours for it to be set. if you're gonna, you know, handle these, you definitely want to let them dry. So I would continue doing that border. I could add white dots in between the pink dots, and there's your cookie. Any questions on that one?
Beautiful.
Voila. All right, so I have this cookie here ready to go for the flood. So I've got my outline and it's crusted over. I've let it sit for about, 10 minutes or so. So it's crusted over and it's going to be able to hold this flood consistency icing. So this is flood that I made yesterday, and I just want to stir it up a little bit, but you can see that it's nice and flows pretty easily. So you just want to reincorporate the icing and mix it together before you put it on your cookie. Make sure there's no crusty bits. So this is another method. If you don't want to use a piping bag, sometimes I skip that and I just keep it in the bowl, and I just take big spoonfuls and plop it on the cookie. That's kind of a faster way of doing it. And then I just use my spoon to push it into place. And you have to touch the outline in order for it to look, like it should. So you push it up to the outline, not touching the cookie, but, making sure it goes up onto the outline. And then the outline is going to keep it from running over. And then what you're going to do next is look for any air bubbles. So this is the wet technique. Now, if I wanted to do decorations like wet on wet, I have to be pretty quick and add them before this crusts over. All right, so I'm not going to add a lot to this because I'm going to add more colors so that you can see exactly how this works. All right, so there's my wet flood icing, and I'm shaking it around to make sure it's distributed. You could also use a scribe tool to kind of move it around. If it's not going where you want it, you can just sort of use your scribe tool to move it into place. Okay, so I'm shaking it so it will heal, and again in like 15 seconds it should all be smooth. Can you see that? And I'm dropping it to bring any air bubbles in there to the surface. And right now I don't see any, but actually there is one. So I'm going to use my scribe tool to pop it. Otherwise it's going to crater, make little divots in your cookie. You don't want that. So you pop the air bubbles when you see them, and they will heal while it's wet. That's how you get them out. Okay. So you can see there's some air bubbles in there, right? Everybody see that? And then you just shake it again and those will heal. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some dots here while it's wet. And this is the flood icing that I did, that I showed you how to do. Okay. Now you could just do dots and have a cute cookie, right? But I'm going to show you a different technique, which uses a toothpick or scribe. And all you do is you just drag it around, like I was telling you earlier. And you make hearts. And you go slow so that you make sure it's going where you want it to. And voila, there you have your heart design. Isn't that cute? Everybody see that? So that's wet on wet technique. Okay. All right. So that has to dry for like 8 hours before you can do anything on top. If you move it, it could crack or it could ripple. Like if you start moving it, or, you know, a lot of times what happens is you get going too fast and, you know, you put your finger in it or something else in it and it'll mess up the surface of your cookie, which you don't want to do. So that is the wet on wet technique. And you can also do lines. You can do all kinds of designs while it's still wet, you know. And so I'm going to set this aside now and show you a different technique. So edible paper. This is from Fancy Flowers, and no, I did not paint this myself. I'm good, but you know, I draw the line with my time. So, so this here is a wafer paper, and I'm going to show you exactly how it comes. It comes in sheets from Fancy Flowers that look like this. So you just cut these out, and then you put, this is royal icing, but you could do it on fondant. And all you do is you put corn syrup or, you know, piping gel on the back of the wafer paper. And then you have to turn it over on parchment paper to let it dry. Parchment paper so it doesn't stick to the surface. And then in the next day, then you'll have something that looks like this, which you can pipe borders around and do all kinds of other embellishments. Okay. So again, Fancy Flowers is so fun. FLOURS.com, Fancy Flowers. And they have all kinds of wafer papers. These are little angels, which I thought are so cute. And then the other kind of edible paper are these sugar sheets. And these come from Michael's or Hobby Lobby. And what I do with them is I take a stamp, a punch, and I think this is a Martha Stewart. And you just put the paper in the punch, and then it creates these cute little lacy effects, you know, or you can cut out all different shapes. But you can also take this, if you have a color printer and a picture, you could print, you know, pictures on these and use them on your cakes or cookies or whatever. So there's a couple types of edible papers that you can use to decorate as well. Any questions on that? Okay, we talked about luster dust. We talked about edible paper, and now we're going to do stenciling. So this is a royal iced cookie, all right? And I want to do a stencil. So we're going to do this love stencil again. So you basically, you put it where you want it. Actually, I might use this one. I think I'll use this one. This one's already used a stencil with dots, right? And I'm going to put the love on top of that in white. So I'm going to take my thick consistency royal icing, and then I'm just going to kind of squiggle some of it out on top of the stencil where I want it to go, like that. And then holding it in place, this is the most important part. You're going to use a palette knife or a knife to smooth over the area of the stencil and then make one swipe through to make it even thickness. And then very carefully, you're going to lift up. And there it is. Okay, isn't that cute? So, and then, you know, if you want to, if you need to fix it, you can use your scribe tool again for that. And just sort of bring it where you want it if it didn't all get where you wanted it. And then you can also add some more if you didn't you didn't get enough in certain areas. Like I might try and add a little bit here. So that's stenciling. Any questions on that? It's like surgery, you know, you gotta you gotta just really be detailed. If you guys, I do give, you know, one-on-one lessons. If you do want to, I do have piping classes, and, you know, there's so many techniques that there's just not enough time to teach all of
Right.
techniques. But if you are interested in this, you know, you can just contact me and I can set up one-on-one. I do one-on-one lessons with students all the time. And if this is something that you are really excited about and want to pursue, it definitely helps to have someone mentor you. Thank you guys so much for joining.
Thank you.
And thank you, Bethany, for having this class.
That was a
And
fun one,
look forward
Cindy.
to-
Thank you.
Look on my website for St. Patrick's Day, Easter. There's going to be more classes coming up. So,
Bye, y'all. Have a good month.
thank you guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Happy Valentine's.